In this lesson, we will talk about two-dimensional array. Previously, you already know one-dimensional array. It's something like this that has many elements, and remember, always the array has only one type of elements. That means we cannot have an array that's composed of, for example, characters and integers and doubles. All the array element must be of the same type. So, for example, when we have one-dimensional array, we declare it as following. We declare the type first, then the name of the array, and between the square brackets we specify how many elements in this array. For example, here we have array A that's composed of 5 elements. Those are the elements of the array, as you can see. So those are the contents, and you know already that the index of the array starts with 0. So if you want to talk about the first element in this one-dimensional array, it's at a 0, and a 1 is the second element, and so on. So the last element in the array is in -5 because the index starts from 0. Now, on the other hand, the two-dimensional array, it's the same concept. The difference is that instead of one-dimensional, here we have two-dimensional. So now we have rows. This is row number. This is another row, third row, and fourth row. And also we have columns. So, for example, this is the first column. This is the second column, and this is the third column. Similarly, also here, when we declare this, it's similarly to a one-dimensional array. When we declare array that has two-dimensional, first we have to specify the type. Similar to one-dimensional array, the two-dimensional array also must be of the same type. So we cannot have different types in the same array. For example, here this array integer means all the elements, and then the name, for example, here we call it x. Here what we need to specify two things. It's different from the one-dimensional. Here we have to need to specify how many rows and how many columns, and usually the first number here, or here between the brackets, the square brackets, represents the number of rows. The second one is number of columns. So for example, my array x is composed of 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are rows, and it composed of 3 columns, column 1, column 2, column 3. Also similar to the indexing in a one-dimensional array, the index here also starts by 0. So when we talk, this is row, the first row in the two-dimensional array is indexed by 0, and the last row is, of course, this in -1. So for example, here, because it's 4 rows, that means the index of the last row is 3. Same thing with the column. The first column number is 0, second column is 1, and third column is 2. Now here, in order to reference any elements in the array, you need to use the number of the row and number of the column. For example, here when we was referencing this this element, it's A3. This is A3. Here no, you need two things to represent an element. You need to specify which row and which column. For example, if we want to talk about this element, which holds the value 8, that's element x21. It's x21, so we can write something like this. If you want to print that element, then we could say cout the element, of course, cout x, and which element here? We are talking about row number 2 and column number 1 to represent that element. So similarly, also we deal with the elements in the two-dimensional array element by element, and in order to reference or to talk about a specific element, you need to specify which row and which column. So this is the difference between the two-dimensional array and the one-dimensional. So this is to represent a specific element, only one element. But what if you want to print all the elements, or traverse over all the elements in the array? Previously, when we was traversing the elements in one-dimensional array, we need to use a loop. that, for example, then I will change, the subscript will change from 0 until n-1, or it's less than the size of the array. Here the same thing, to traverse all the elements in the two-dimensional array, you need also to use a loop. But here you will use nested loop, because the outer loop will, for example, represent or reference which row we are talking about. Now the inner loop will loop over all the columns in that row. So for example, here if I want to print all the elements of this two-dimensional array, then I need to use for loop, and start integer I equals 0, because all the rows started with 0 and columns started with 0, and I is less than. Now I will reference which row I am talking about. So here, because I have 4 rows, that means from 0 until 3, so it's I is less than 4 I plus plus. And for now I need another loop, which is a nested loop, to reference the column in that row. So I will use also another for statement. Now I will use another counter or variable j starting from 0, also because the columns is starting from 0, equal j is less than. Now how many columns I have here? I have 3 columns, so it's less than 3, and j plus plus. Now I will just say cout x of I and j. So by this it will, first of all I will be 0, that means I'm talking about x of 0, j will be 0, so it means I'm talking about x of 0 0, that means we are talking about this element. Then what will happen, it will print that element, as j will be incremented, because first inner loop should finish first. J will be incremented, j will be 1 while I is still 0, that means we are talking about 0 1, that means we are talking about this one, so it will print 8. And j becomes 2, that means it's x0 2, we are talking about this one, this 0 2, row number 0, column number 2, and j becomes 3, which makes this condition false. And when it's false, that means that the inner loop is done, is finished, so it will come back to the outer loop. I will be incremented by 1, so now I is 1, it will go back to the inner loop, j reinitialize it to 0, that means we will talk about x of 1 and 0. So x of 1 0, that means row number 1 column 0, we are talking about this one. J will keep incremented while I is still 1, that means we are printing the elements here, and so on. So in order to traverse or to deal with the all elements in the two-dimensional array, you need nested loops, something like this.